Hello and welcome. You're watching Al24 News live from Algiers, and these are top stories of today. Officials in Ukraine's strategic port city of Mariupol say they will start to evacuate civilians on Saturday after surrounding Russian forces announced a temporary ceasefire. Stand families watched in disbelief as the huge fireball mushroomed into the cold air in Chernihiv. NATO has rejected Ukraine's request for a no-fly zone, triggering outrage from President Volodymyr Zelensky, who claims the decision allows Russia to keep on its military operation in his nation. And UN Food Programme is trying to help 5 million people in desperate need inside Ukraine's. Good afternoon again. Those were today's headlines, and we start with a summary of the whole situation in Ukraine and Russia. So far, Russian forces declare a ceasefire to allow humanitarian corridors out of the Ukrainian cities of Mariupol and Volnovakha. President Zelensky accuses NATO for weakness after it rejected the idea of no-fly zone over Ukraine. Multiple news outlets say they will pause their work inside Russia, citing a new law that could mean jail for those found to be intentionally spreading fake news. Russia says it is blocking Facebook and restricting access to Twitter, citing restrictions on Russia media. And finally, more than 1.2 million people have fled Ukraine to neighboring countries, according to UN. Russia is targeting major cities in Ukraine more than a week into a war where Moscow has faced setbacks on the battlefield. Russia's push to seize key Ukrainian cities accelerated, with the Russian military claiming that its forces were fully in control of Kherson, a port near the Black Sea. Russia's defense ministry blamed the incident at the site of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant in Ukraine on Ukrainian saboteurs, calling it a monstrous provocation, while Ukraine has said Russian forces attacked the plant in the early hours of Friday, an incident that provoked international condemnation of Moscow. The incident at Europe's largest nuclear power plant located in southeastern Ukraine triggered global alarm and fear of a catastrophe that could dwarf the world's worst nuclear disaster. The State Nuclear Regulatory Inspectorate of Ukraine said in a statement that losing cooling would lead to significant radioactive releases into the environment that could be worse than Chernobyl, while the Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, Rafael Mariano Grossi, has called for a halt in fighting and warned of severe danger if the reactors were hit. Officials in Ukraine's strategic port city of Mariupol say they will start to evacuate civilians on Saturday after surrounding Russian forces announced a temporary ceasefire. Evacuations were due to begin at 11 a.m. local time, but the city council said Russian forces were not observing the agreed ceasefire along the whole length of the evacuation route and that negotiations were ongoing. After negotiations, Ukraine and Russia have agreed to create humanitarian corridors in areas of Ukraine where fighting is worst. Ukrainian President Advisor Mikhailo Podolyak said while there was no breakthrough on a ceasefire, negotiators did not reach agreement, or the negotiators did reach agreement on joint efforts to secure humanitarian corridors for evacuations and the supply of medicine and food to sites.
Коммюнике, на которое вышли стороны, и, соответственно, мы договорились продолжить работу уже в третьем раунде в максимально ближайшие сроки. О совместном обеспечении гуманитарных коридоров для эвакуации мирного гражданского населения, а также для доставки медикаментов и продуктов питания в места наиболее ожесточенных боев с возможностью, подчеркиваю, с возможностью временного прекращения огня на период когда будет осуществляться эвакуация в секторах, где она проводится.
International organizations indicate that about 1 million Ukrainians were forced to flee their country from the military operation that Russia launched on Ukraine about a week ago, amid expectations of a significant increase in the number of refugees. Hussein Berkan reports.
The United Nations announced the crossing of more than 1 million refugees from Ukraine towards neighboring countries following the Russian military intervention. According to data published by the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, more than 1 million refugees crossed from Ukraine to neighboring countries between February 24 and March 2nd. More than half of them headed to Poland. The UNHCR indicated that more than 900,000 refugees crossed to Poland, Hungary, Moldova, and Slovakia. The organization also warned that the deteriorating situation in Ukraine could cause 4 million civilians to flee the country.
I'm from the Zhytomyr region. Missiles explode there. A rocket fell on the maternity ward. My relatives remained there. My husband defends our country.
The organization also indicated that 96,000 people crossed between February 18 and 23rd from Donetsk and Luhansk regions toward Russia.
We are from Kramatorsk, Donetsk region. We left because of the war. I'm scared to go to bed. I'm scared for my child's life. And we just packed up and we left. We traveled 1,007 kilometers to get here.
At the dawn of last February 24, Russia launched a military operation in Ukraine, which was followed by angry international reactions and the imposition of tough economic and financial sanctions on Moscow.
Stunned families watched in disbelief as the huge fireball mushroomed into the cold air in Chernihiv. Russia made clear its plans, with Western security officials fearing they would overthrow the government and implement their new regime within days. NATO has rejected Ukraine's request for a no-fly zone, triggering outrage from President Volodymyr Zelensky, who claims the decision allows Russia to keep on its military operation in his nation. Nabil Khazini.
Arriving one after another, NATO foreign ministers met in Brussels to discuss a crisis reaching its 10th day in Ukraine.
We have to strengthen the eastern flank of NATO, speaking of NATO action.
10 days of fear as well inside NATO countries, whose leaders see the coming days to be even worse.
The days to come are likely to be worse, with more death, more suffering, and more destruction.
Kiev wanted NATO to be its shield against Russian missiles, a role rejected to be played by the North Atlantic Alliance, whose decision was met by strong criticism from the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky.
All NATO intelligence services are well aware of the enemy's plans. They also confirmed that Russia wants to continue the offensive. How is it possible? For 9 days, we have been witnessing a fierce war. They are destroying our cities. They are bombarding our people, our children, residential areas, churches, schools. They destroy everything that ensures a normal life, a human life, and they want to continue. Knowing that further strike and further casualties are inevitable, NATO has deliberately decided not to close the skies over Ukraine.
NATO has more than 200 ships and 130 fighter jets on alert, but the decision was firm. None will be used to create a no-fly zone.
We are not part of this conflict, and we have a responsibility to ensure it does not escalate and spread beyond Ukraine.
In the Baltic Sea, the United Kingdom led a coalition launching naval maneuvers in Copenhagen, a show intended to manifest Western unity against Russia.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said on Friday in Brussels that the United States and the European Union must maintain pressure on Russia to end the military operation in Ukraine. Let's have a listen.
Stability in Europe hangs in the balance. And the international rules-based order that's critical to maintaining peace and security is being put to the test by Russia's unprovoked and unjustified invasion of Ukraine. Russia's attack created this humanitarian crisis. Now, all countries have a responsibility to pressure the Kremlin to alleviate at least some of the misery that it has wrought. I said that if Russia chose the path of aggression, we would impose massive consequences on Russia, including unprecedented economic sanctions. I know some people thought that was more rhetoric than reality. I think we've demonstrated already how strong that reality is. And again, we're looking every day at measures to increase the extraordinary pressure we're already exerting.
We'll take a final.
Faced with the escalation of the conflict in Ukraine, US and Russian military have established between them a new telephone channel supposed to be used in case of emergency, announces the Pentagon. Let's have a listen.
We don't have perfect knowledge of exactly how this attack on the nuclear power plant transpired. Clearly there was one. Clearly it was violent. Clearly ordnance was used. An attack was conducted on the power plant in an effort by Russian forces to gain control of it. We cannot contest or refute reports that they are in fact in control of it.
And now let's have a closer look to the list of Ukrainian and Russian demands as follows. As President Volodymyr Zelensky and Vladimir Putin of Russia return for peace talks, Ukraine has listed demands that include an immediate Russian ceasefire, troops withdrawal and immediate European Union membership for Ukraine. On the other hand, Russia is still sticking to its previous list of demands and security guarantees, which include the West to agree to lower tensions in Europe and defuse the crisis over Ukraine. NATO should limit its deployment of troops and weapons to the alliance's eastern flank, in effect returning to the Allied forces to where they were stationed in 1997 before an eastward expansion. Moscow demands a guarantee from Ukraine that it will not enter the US-led NATO, and NATO rule out further expansion, including the accession of Ukraine into the alliance, and that it does not hold drills without previous agreement from Russia in Ukraine, Eastern Europe, in Caucasus, countries such as Georgia and in Central Asia. And finally, Moscow also calls for the two countries, US and Russia, to pull back any short or medium-range missile systems out of reach, replacing the previous intermediate-range nuclear forces treaty that the US left in 2018. President Vladimir Putin said in a telephone conversation with German Chancellor Olaf Scholz Friday that Moscow was open to dialogue with Ukraine and hoped that Kiev would take a reasonable stance during a third round of talks between Russia and Ukraine. However, Scholz expressed worry over the reports of civilian casualties and military losses on both sides. G7 foreign ministers of France, Canada, Germany, Italy, Japan, and the UK and USA released a joint statement condemning the Russian military operation of Ukraine and urging Moscow to stop shelling Ukraine's nuclear power plant. Within the same context, an emergency summit of the UNSC was held after the Zaporizhzhia power plant shelling. The US ambassador to the UN condemned or commented on the Russian action and described it as reckless and dangerous.
141 nations across the world have called loudly and clearly on President Putin to stop this brutal, unjustified, unprovoked attack. Not only has he not listened, we've just witnessed a dangerous new escalation that represents a dire threat to all of Europe and the world. As a first step, we call on Russia to withdraw its troops from the plant, to permit medical treatment for injured personnel, to ensure operators have full access to the site and are able to communicate with nuclear regulators, and to allow the operators to conduct shift changes to ensure the continued safe operation of the plant.
A volunteer records a video on his mobile phone asking for donations before he is cut off by the sound of an airstrike hit a building in Ukraine. The blast shatters windows and sends debris flying across the room. The US and its allies have retaliated against Russia's special military operation in Ukraine with some unprecedented sanctions in the last week. Rather, from intervening militarily, they have retaliated by attacking Russia's economy. The details in this report by Kanifa Zachary.
Over the course of the week, the sanctions have become more severe. What started out as supposedly limited package of measures aimed at isolating the two breakaway Ukrainian regions of Donetsk and Luhansk on February 21st has quickly developed into the most extensive set of multilateral economic sanctions ever imposed on a major global economy. By taking such drastic measures so fast, the Biden administration and its foreign allies sought to inflict costs on Russia that would push it to reassess its military operation in Ukraine before it became too lengthy. Even as the extent and severity of the punishments have increased, these efforts have so far been fruitless. Vladimir Putin, the Russian president, has showed no evidence of changing his mind. The hope from the US and its allies appears to be that his calculus, or that of the people around him, might alter as the implications for the Russian people become more severe. Putin's move hit Russia's economy, crippling the ruble. However, several companies took action and decided to pull out from Russia. Many big tech companies expressed support of Ukraine, abandoning projects happening in Russia or stopped selling their articles.
BP said they would pull out of oil and gas investment in Russia worth billions. ExxonMobil abandoned the $4 billion oil and gas project. Meanwhile, Shell ditched its stakes and left major gas project in Siberia and the Gidan Peninsula.
Apple announced that it was stopping all sales of iPhones, MacBooks, and other Apple products to Russia, limited access to Apple Pay, and banned Russian propaganda apps.
Volkswagen stopped its operations and production in Russia. General Motors, Ford, BMW, Volvo, and Mercedes-Benz stopped selling cars.
Big planes manufacturer companies such as Boeing and Airbus suspended their building projects and the supply of parts and maintenance for their planes on the Russian territory.
IKEA stopped its operations in Russia and Belarus. Fashion giant H&M closed its stores and stopped new orders during the week. ASOS and Boo made similar moves. Nike and IKEA closed stores.
UPS, DHL, and FedEx stopped their delivery service to Russia and Ukraine amid the military operation. Sea-mail delivery companies such as Maersk and MSC, Mediterranean shipping companies, stopped cargo shipments to Russia.
Disney and Warner Media paused the release of new movies.
And Norway's $1.3 trillion sovereign wealth fund said it would divest shares of 47 Russian companies and Russian government bonds, and the list goes on.
Meanwhile, UN Food Programme is trying to help 5 million people in desperate need inside Ukraine. Its Director General David Basley says those who have managed to escape are the lucky ones. The WFP has set up distribution warehouses in neighboring countries to get food to people in Ukraine. And in a letter written to President Joe Biden, members of the United States Congress expressed their displeasure with the policy of the United States of America on the Saharan issue. Members of Congress expressed concern about the arms deal that the Biden administration agreed to conclude with Morocco in December last year, recalling the official rejection of all Moroccan claims of sovereignty over Western Sahara by the former United States administration. And now it's time to have a reminder of our main top stories. Officials in Ukraine's strategic port city of Mariupol say they will start to evacuate civilians on Saturday after surrounding Russian forces announced a temporary ceasefire. Stand families watched in disbelief as the huge fireball mushroomed into the cold air in Chernihiv. NATO has rejected Ukraine's request for a no-fly zone, triggering outrage from President Volodymyr Zelensky, who claims the decision allows Russia to keep on its military operation in his nation. And UN Food Programme is trying to help 5 million people in desperate need inside Ukraine. That's all for me, Nadia Kasmi, and the rest of the team. The news continues on Al 24 News. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.